Motioned by Richard. Richard
No,
Underdown,
I had a correct. No, sorry,
seconded
I
by
had a
Richard
correction.
Domeyer.
Yeah, I had a correction.
Thank
Where is it?
you, Richard.
Um,
Correction.
somewhere in the minutes it says, oh, where I wrote it down. Somewhere in the minutes it says we're increasing the number of unit of, was it lots by from 1 to 17. It should be increasing the number of lots by 1 to 17.
Okay, so you're talking about the minutes
I'm
rather
talking
than
about the
the
minutes. Yeah.
agenda. We were still
Sorry,
on
I've
the approval of
lost.
the agenda.
Yeah, I've lost my. I can't see my note here, so sorry. But that's essentially it.
Okay, but we're still on approval of the agenda.
Oh, sorry. My bad. My bad.
That's all right. May I take you as seconding the motion to approve the agenda?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry. Yeah.
all in favor? Aye.
Right.
Okay, hearing no one opposed, we move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the adoption of the minutes of our last meeting. Richard Domeyer, you had a comment about those minutes?
Yeah, that's and I can't find the exact spot, but the wording was increasing the number of sites from 1 to 17 should be by 1 to 17.
Okay, thank you. Do you remember which, you don't remember which item number it was?
It's
Yeah,
for
it was.
1620 Joan Audrey Lane.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will revise the minutes again. And I will resend them out tomorrow.
Okay.
But you can approve them with the, you can approve them, as amended at this point if you want.
So your point, Richard, was that approving it instead of from 1 to 17, that it should have been approval by 1 to 17, because that doesn't sound correct to me.
Yeah, it's not approving by 1. I think that was the request, but that didn't go ahead. Yeah, but yeah, by 1, increasing by 1 to 17 is correct, not from 1 to 17.
But the application was to go from 1 lot to
Oh,
17.
okay. Sorry, you're
So
right.
I think the wording is actually correct.
Maybe. Yeah, okay. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
Daniel, can you jump in here?
That's my understanding too. I was going to suggest you could just defer this to staff and we can make sure
it's
that
right.
we're matching everything and the paragraph is right and we can bring it to the next meeting rather than.
Okay, thank
really
you.
delve
So
into it. Yeah.
we will defer that item to next meeting. And that brings us to item number 3 on our agenda for this evening, which is public comments. And I see that we do have 2 members of the public present, being Margaret Underhill and Rob Purdy. So Rob, I see you now. And did you wish to make some comments for our consideration this evening?
I don't have any prepared comments up front. We submitted a written submission for our rezoning at 620 Laura Road, so a lot of our commentary is in there, so you can read through that in detail. I'm mostly here just if you have questions as you go through your discussion to help try and answer any questions about our property and our business. So.
Okay. Well, I have momentarily lost my picture here, so excuse me. I don't know what I did to do that.
Did you get my
So today, we just discussed that we would like to ask any questions during the public comments portion of our meeting. And so that when we get to the body of the council referrals, we'll stick to our usual format of making recommendations. So if we have any questions, did any commission members have questions that they wanted to raise of Rob while he's with or during this portion of the meeting? Richard Underdown.
Yes, thanks, Brenda. Hi, Rob. I'm just wondering why we're at this late date for applying for the rezoning when this is the extension of the initial
Is
temporary
that how I did it?
and it's about to expire at the end of this year.
How
Why-
do I turn it on and off? It's on.
I'm
Oh,
getting
sorry,
some
Patty,
background
we
noise
can.
here.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Richard. Go ahead.
But so my question is just regarding the timing of the rezoning application. You know, why has it been left to this late date?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we moved off of Bowen about 2 years ago. We're on the East Coast now, where my family is. For family reasons, I had to kind of move back out east. We've had our property up for sale for well, 2 separate times over the last 2 years. Instead of starting a rezoning, we thought we could leave it to purchaser to kind of. Our intention would have been to rezone exactly what's in front of you guys right now, which is just making the cidery permanent. We left it open to see if there's any buyer, because they might have different ideas with what they want to do with it. We did. I won't talk too much about the sales process, but we did receive quite a bit of interest on the property, just not on kind of the interest we were looking for, which is keeping the orchard going. And that we did have a buyer that was quite interested. They actually submitted this rezoning application. There was accommodation alongside it. It was 10 sleeping units that were included with the cidery being made permanent. That went to kind of the pre-meeting at council to get comments. After that, based on neighborhood feedback and public feedback and feedback from staff and council, we decided to sort of I don't know what the word is, but not continue with that purchase contract, take over the rezoning and kind of bring it back to what we think is the best fit for the neighborhood, for the property, for the community, and get that rezoned. If it is successful, then we'll kind of revisit what we do with the property. Our intention has always been to, what I have in the written submission is give the orchard a reason to exist, and that's why we came up with the idea with the cidery, and so yeah. So if it is successful, we'll kind of revisit it and see if we can continue keep running it kind of remotely. We have great people on the ground that are working with us. We employ like 4 people on Bowen to help run it, and they've been amazing through the whole the 2 years we've been away. So it can run in like this, but if there's somebody that would want to take it over, we'd be open to that as well. So yeah, so we just changed it back to what we think is kind of the best fit for the island. So hopefully, does that answer your question? Or?
Well, it does then. And I assume that offer
Yeah.
to purchase was conditional upon the hotel, I mean, or guest house, whatever it was called.
It has been called a hotel. It's guest accommodation, and it was 10 sleeping units was the language, and yes, the purchase agreement was conditional on them getting approval for their idea. So it was their submission, and then and we decided to take that back after we heard comments from the community. So
there's no pending offer to purchase the property at this point.
No,
Okay.
it's actually not listed any longer. We've taken it off the market. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess I have a quick question. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the ideas behind having a cidery at that location was so that it would result in the protection of the Riley's orchard. And so I'm curious if the buyers who purchase it have other ideas, what's to prevent them from not maintaining those trees or replanting them with a different variety of apple. They might think having all one type of apple is better for cider making. Is there, how is that, is there any way to address that, or is that part of what you're offering?
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky one. We're open to ideas through discussion, and on protection, it's really hard to protect like an orchard long term with certainty. We're very interested in what's there and keeping it going. Our idea was to start a cidery that's heavily attached, like the brand of what we're doing is heavily attached to the heritage orchard that's there. So removing it, you'd have to really change sort of direction on how the cidery has been set up. There is no protection on the orchard right now, and this is something we've sort of wrestled with a little bit, because it's having something unique like this on private property creates all these sort of questions. And we have looked at even ideas of getting it onto public property, moving it. We had discussions with UBC a number of years ago, and we've looked at how to get this into a public space, because there is this kind of, it exists on private property. It was built out as basically a hobby, and built out really well and became kind of a significant thing. That was our attraction to it. We were living down the street when sort of we learned that the Rileys were interested in sort of transitioning it to somebody else, and so we took it on, and yeah, that was just, it's an idea, the one that we had, which is the cidery, attaching it to the orchard, and again, using the same terminology, giving it a reason to exist. We do think if the business, it has proven to work. We've operated it for 5 years, and it operates well, and it's a functioning business now. And our sort of premise is that if that can be functioning and it's based on that heritage orchard, somebody, if it's us or somebody else, there's more of an incentive to keep it going. The idea, we've been wrestling a lot with the covenant idea on the property and exactly what that can look like. And again, we're very open to ideas, but it's tricky to protect like a living thing. So just things like if there's disease and it gets wiped out, or if something happens, there's a fire and it gets wiped out, like what happens and what are the sort of unintended sort of outcomes that might come from a covenant on the property? And if there's a covenant, like what does that look like? So far the discussion's been around like an agricultural covenant. So that doesn't necessarily say like this specific thing will exist forever. And it's actually really tricky to craft that. And that's at least what we're finding. And like, we're still open to ideas. Our interest is that like in 100 years, this orchard is still there. There's another, I've written some in the written submission, but there's some other practical realities to the orchard that I don't want to get too technical on it, but the trees that are planted there are kind of like 30-year sort of lifespan trees. They're on dwarf rootstock, so they're smaller trees. So there's a replanting that has to happen kind of continuously to keep it healthy and keep it going. You could probably stretch the lifespan maybe out to 40 or 50 years on the trees if you really sort of, we don't really push the like commercial production of the trees. It's there as a collection, and so because of that, I think the lifespan could be longer. But typically, like commercially, dwarf rootstock is like a 25 to 30 year sort of productive period, and then they get replaced. So this orchard is 30 years old now. It was planted over time, so some of the trees are 30 years, some are 10 years old, and everything in between. So there is kind of this replanting that has to occur over time in this orchard. So that's getting a little bit into detail, but just to give you some context of some of the things that we're sort of wrestling with. But we would love to see like 2-3 generations from now that this orchard's still here. If the business enables that, that's great. If there's another way to enable that, we're kind of all ears on that as well. So.
Okay, Kirsty, I see your hand, and then Richard Domeyer. I'm not sure if that was a hand up or not, but I saw Kirsty first.
Yeah. Okay, I was just wondering whether you had any thought of putting it into ALR, because then all of this,
Yep.
The operation is allowed through ALR. You need to use those apples, which there aren't very many apples to make the cider, but I'm
Yep.
sure you have a lease somewhere else to make it viable. So that's
So
the
yes,
question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we did look at that when we first sort of took this on. We kind of took on the project in 2017. We bought the property in 2019. We do lease another orchard. We lease an orchard in Costin, BC, which is kind of like the organic fruit valley in the interior. It's a 7-acre organic Macintosh orchard. And we use that to make our cider. So we bring that once a year to Bowen in juice. It gets pressed up there and we just bring the juice up and put it in our tanks. And then we also use the fruit from our property. So the combination of those two is what makes our, there's kind of 3 core ciders that we make. We did look at ALR. We didn't see like it's kind of interesting. There's pros and cons to doing it. Our property is quite small for what they kind of consider as agricultural land. And the mixed use, it's still primarily a sort of residential / commercial. It's rural residential, which is a mixed use property. There's commercial and industrial applications or things allowed on the property, and how that fits into the LR. We did have a conversation with the ALC, Agricultural Land Commission, and it just didn't seem like worth doing. Not to kind of for what you're saying, which is like it might be easier to maybe have the business and operate within. There is kind of different rules, so you sort of switch from one set to another. And interestingly, I think the other cidery on Bowen is ALR. I think the Meadowbrook corner is an ALR property. So yeah, there's pros and cons. We did look at it. We didn't think it was, and it was at the time it was our primary residence. So there's considerations there as well for doing it. So we decided not to.
Okay, any other questions? No, okay. Then I see we had Margaret Underhill with us as well. And I know that Margaret, you had also given us some submissions. Did you want a couple minutes to speak to those now, and then we'll have the same opportunity for questions?
Yeah, I'll just emphasize the main points of our submission. Certainly Rob has covered a certain amount of some of the issues at work. But after 5 years of the cidery tap, most neighbors have come to reluctant acceptance, conditional on the proposed bylaw on the next council agenda, which restricts the operating hours, the maximum floor area, and prohibits a lounge endorsement. We feel it also must include a conservation covenant to protect the heritage orchard. And the reason for that is that ever since the original TUP application in 2021, the justification for permission to establish a cidery has been to provide the required revenue to maintain the heritage orchard. And council at the time, of course, determined that the importance of the trees outweighed any negative aspects of an industrial cidery facility in our rural residential neighborhood. And the preservation of this orchard has been used since in the application for the TUP renewal and again in the current application. But as Rob has pointed out, just for most of the last 2 years, half of the last 2 years roughly, the property has been up for sale, and the owners are currently living elsewhere in the country. And if the property had been sold while on the market, or is sold in the future without a covenant that protects the heritage orchard and provides, proper care of the trees, there will be no way to ensure its survival in the future. Yet this remains the justification for the rezoning to allow the industrial cidery. And we feel that if the applicants are reluctant to commit to a conservation covenant to protect the heritage trees, recognizing that events outside an owner's control, such as disease, fire, and drought, could happen, then council must reject any rezoning allowing the cidery. We also question the planner's report that quotes OCP objectives that support local food production. And of course, this 620 Laura Road is not growing food, but they're growing fruit to produce alcoholic beverages and bringing in 75% of the fruit to produce the cider as juice from elsewhere in BC. And unfortunately, if the municipality cannot ensure that the heritage trees are protected, these trees could unfortunately wither and die, perhaps sooner than they would otherwise, negating the supposed purpose of this application. And through all of this, the residents of Laura and West Side Road have acted in good faith and have come a long way to effect a compromise with the owners of 620 Laura Road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And does anybody have any questions for Margaret? Well, we have her with us, or arising from Margaret's comments for Rob. I see he's still online. Richard Domeyer?
Yeah, just for Rob, what happens to the waste from the cidery processing?
Yeah, there's so it's I think you're probably asking about from fruit. So it's there's pomace, apple pomace. So when we press, we just compost that. To put it in perspective, there's probably 3 or 4 wheelbarrows worth of fruit or pomace per year. We have a compost pile, and it goes on that. That's the same way it's been sort of treated for the last 20 years on the property. It's also been mentioned cidered lees. So that's when you ferment, like if you fill a tank. Our tanks are both, we have 4 tanks. We have 2 5,000-liter tanks. We have a 3,500-liter tank and a 1,000-liter tank. It's sort of a sequential process to go through it. You're just kind of racking from one to the next. When you first ferment, basically the sediment settles. That's called lees. And that, to put that in perspective, we're probably 25 to, it's a big range. It's probably 25 to about 400 liters of lees annually. So that's resulting from 6 to 8 batches of cider. And that we can kind of mix with dry organics. And the concern with that in high volumes is it's like I think it's like a high oxygen or high concentrated sort of nutrient value in it. So if we took that and it ended up in a waterway, it's quite a high nutrient value. So you have to kind of mix it with dry compost and kind of dilute it. So we add that and we turn our compost piles. So we compost that as well. And it's pretty low volumes that we're doing every year. The difference where I'm saying 25 to 400 liters, that sounds like a pretty big range. But it's kind of dependent on the juice that you're fermenting. So, and the source apples. There's no water that goes into the process. That's maybe an important thing as well. So it's just apple juice that goes into our tank. So when you have our cider, it's just the only ingredient is apple juice, fermented apple juice. So there's no water used in the process that ends up in the cider as well. So I think that's an important point. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, let me know.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm feeling a little bit of time pressure in terms of getting to the referrals themselves. And so unless there are any more pressing questions, I'd like to move on to item 4 of our agenda. Okay, Daniel, that would be over to you. Oh, and just thank you very much, Rob, as well as Margaret, for your comments. We always find comments helpful to us as we consider these referrals. So thank you for coming. Daniel.
Great. All right, I have a presentation on this referral that you, I'm sure by now are quite familiar with, but this is a rezoning application at 620 Laura Road. All right, so the application is to permit a cidery use on the property that's currently permitted through a temporary use permit. The proposal is to use the same definitions and restrictions as currently permitted under the temporary use permit and as exists on site, but to permanently allow this additional land use. So its location is located at the intersection of West Side Road and Laura Road, which is just off of Bowen Bay Road, just after it's left Adams Road on the west side of Bowen Island. Its zoning is in the rural residential 2 zone, as shown here. And so that, like all our rural residential zones, allow uses such as dwelling, agriculture, stable, and kennel, allows accessory uses, residential guest accommodation, home occupation. And then Yeah, just in terms of what the agricultural use allows. So it means the use of lands, buildings, or structures for growing, rearing, producing, harvesting of crops, plants, livestock, and other animals. Includes the processing and sale of products harvested, reared, or produced on that lot, and the storage of machinery, implements, and supplies for use by the agriculture operations. So just for context for this, in terms of cider making, it's like if you had a property that was zoned rural residential and you wanted to grow apples and you wanted to process those apples themselves into, a juice and sell it, that would be permitted under the agriculture zoning. And what the additional permission is for using a percentage that comes from off the site. And then obviously if you're fermenting it, it requires provincial approval, but that would be separate from our approval. In terms of official community plan, in our current, so 2011 OCP, it's designated as R1 rural designation. And so that overall objective of the designation, it includes large lots that provide rural resource values such as agriculture and forestry, and properties that have been maintained for the purposes of a rural lifestyle. And then I have just here, there's a series of objectives in our current OCP about agriculture. So I flagged a series of them here. But so like objective 80, to encourage commercial and domestic agriculture in suitable locations and to encourage local food production. 82, to preserve lands that are used or are suitable for agriculture activity. 88 is to provide for the supporting infrastructure necessary to maintain and strengthen the agricultural economy. And 89, to encourage land uses that are compatible with farming. And just for relevant, we're in this weird stage of our, evaluating proposals. We have a draft OCP that you've probably seen, and hopefully you filled out the round 2 survey of. But in this round 2 engagement, it would place 620 Laura Road into the current draft into a rural residential transition designation, it's called, which is more or less the same designation as the R1 rural. It's sort of the medium rural designation. Relevant, you've heard discussion tonight about a temporary use permit. So TUP 2021-0017 was issued by council in 2021 for a 3-year term. And this temporary use permit permitted the cidery use with restrictions on the property. And it was renewed for an additional 3-year term, December 11th, 2023. So this temporary use permit expires December 11th, 2026. And just, I don't know if we've talked a whole lot about temporary use permits. They're a permit that's outlined in the Local Government Act, and that's meant as a way that council can approve an additional use on a property that's not in the zoning for a period of up to 3 years. By way of background, this came to council April 13th, and at this point, the application was that application for cidery use plus the guest house use with the overnight accommodation. Council referred that application to you and to the Parks Environment Committee, and directed staff to report back. But before we were able to schedule and come to that referral, the application was amended, and so we went back to council with the amended application May 25th, and council then referred the revised application to you and the Parks Environment Committee. They directed staff to prepare bylaws to amend the land use bylaw to allow the development, and directed staff to provide notice of first reading of the land use bylaw amendment as required under section 467 of the Local Government Act. And I'll show you, okay, I have a slide there. So what that essentially means is that in rezoning applications in BC, if a rezoning application is consistent with the official community plan and it's commercial in nature, council may choose to give notice at first reading instead of holding a public hearing. So in the Local Government Act, if it's a rezoning application that doesn't amend the OCP and is residential, council is prohibited from holding a public hearing now, and we just cannot, and we give notice at first reading instead. And when they're in this category where it's determined it's consistent with the OCP but it's not residential, council may choose to waive the public hearing, and that's what they've done in this case in that May 25th motion. So in terms of where we are, the application was introduced to council. It's been referred to committees. That's where we are today. The next step is bylaw to be presented for first reading. So we have scheduled and advertised that to take place at the July 27th meeting. So I guess Monday. Yeah, and then we would refer to Islands Trust before they would come back for second and third reading and then considered for adoption. So the proposed bylaw that's been drafted would rezone 620 Laura Road to RR2A, should say. So a zone variation of the rural residential 2 zone. And so the zone variation would outline that cidery is a permitted use, and then it would copy some of the things in the TUP. So it would say the cidery may not have a lounge endorsement, and then it would set the hours. And then it would have, similar to the temporary use permit, it would have a maximum floor area of retail space and a maximum area of the patio space. But these areas are reduced from the temporary use permit and to reflect sort of what's actually on the site now. Whereas the TUP was sort of, before it was established, it was sort of like setting maximum area, and then what was actually built on the site is slightly smaller. So the bylaw would be slightly those smaller amounts. And then I just have here the definitions that would be inserted through this bylaw as well. So this cidery definition is the same definition that came from the temporary use permit. So it's about a cidery facility where 25% of the cider production comes from fruit grown on the same lot, and imported BC fruit shall be limited to no more than 75% of cider production. And then it outlines what a cidery can do. It can include cider tours, cider tasting, cider sales, a picnic area, lounge endorsement, and then sale of cider promotional products. But then in that zone variation, we say for this property in this zone variation, it's not allowed the lounge endorsement. So that endorsement is possible for licensed cideries generally in BC, and that's like the Bowen Island Cider House is in the ALR, which permits the lounge endorsement. They've received a lounge endorsement, so they can essentially operate, more akin to a sort of restaurant inside the building. But so, which in the bylaw, then we would specifically say that this is not allowed a lounge endorsement. All right, so some of the key points that have come up with the Parks Environment Committee and just anytime discussion with council. Water is obviously a key thing in many applications on Bowen. So you'll see in your application, Riley Cidery is provided, or the applicant has provided a hydrogeologist report completed in 2021 as part of the application for a permit from Vancouver Coastal Health, which they've subsequently received. And that report provides detail on the water supply for the property. So the water on the property comes from a surface water license from the creek, which is for irrigation of the apple orchard, and that predates the cidery operation. That's the sort of longstanding water source for the apple trees themselves or the orchard themselves, and then from an existing well, which provides the wash water used in the commercial operation. And as you heard from the applicant, water is not used in the production of cidery itself, so water is not an input into cider making. And then staff discussion. So in terms of septic, so in my initial staff introduction report, when we had referred the application that included the guest house to Vancouver Coastal Health, and then what we reported to council was VCH was recommending a registered on-site wastewater practitioner, or ROPE, provide a letter of assurance for the guest house use to confirm that the potential additional flow wouldn't cause a negative impact. So then I re-referred it to Coastal Health and said, okay, the application has been reduced in scope to the cidery. The guest house is no longer proposed. Do you think we should still require this ROPE letter? And they had replied, so I provided here, that no, they don't think a letter of assurance from a ROPE is required. And the applicant provided the sewerage system filing for the septic system for the cidery building, and so that's in your application, just to show that it was built according to Vancouver Coastal Health regulations and to service the cidery. Conservation development policy. So yeah, you're familiar with this policy, but the goal of the policy is that a minimum of 50% of the total land subject to the rezoning application is protected from further development. Priority is to be given to protection of any identified environmentally sensitive areas and green space. And so we've noted areas of the property suitable for protection include riparian areas of Murray Creek and existing farmland for agricultural protection. It's sort of an interesting note that the conservation development policy itself, as you know, talks about rezoning applications where there's an increase in density. So we haven't fully directly discussed that. Staff have brought it up as, a policy that's probably relevant to this rezoning, but I guess the commission could think about whether this is in fact an increase in density on the land or not, so whether that should be applicable. And then I just have the blank recommendations square here for your comments. So I'll stop sharing now and I'm open for questions or for the commission to start discussion.
Kirsty. Oh, sorry. And Kirsty and then Betty.
Oh, hi, Daniel. Just a question. If running a business remotely is challenging, running a business period is challenging, is the rezoning of this property to a cidery going to compromise sales? Like, what happens if the orchard does it go defunct, or it requires more than, if they want to grow, then the orchard isn't going to grow, so then they require more input to or imported from BC apple juice. Like, what happens if that happens, if the business is no longer? Can it be something else, or is this zoning requiring it now be a cidery? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, zoning is a way of providing additional permitted uses. So if the zoning goes through, it's like the property would then be permitted to have a cidery. But the zoning in any rural residential zone permits to have a stable, and people don't have to have a stable.
So they don't. So it gets permitted or rezoned. They don't have to have an orchard. They don't have to have a cidery.
Yeah, like if the bylaw is adopted as it is, it would say you now have permission to have a cidery on the property.
Sorry, Ken, I know Betty has to go to another meeting. So Betty, did you want to ask your question before you have to hop off?
Yeah, it just feels like this is a highly industrial use. So I'm wondering how precedent setting what we're doing is. Are we automatically saying that industry is agriculture for all agricultural uses on rural land?
I mean, I guess I would say for one is cideries and wineries are defined as farm uses by the Agricultural Land Commission. So like in the ALR land, this would be a farm use that a local government cannot prohibit. And our agriculture zoning permits processing of stuff, I mean, from that lot. But in that sense, like our agriculture zoning has always been permissive of processing of the stuff that's grown on the lot.
So what you're saying is we're not really changing the use, even though in this case it's basically an industrial process. To me, it's sort of an industrial process and a tourism attraction, and the agricultural part is kind of the illusion. Anyway, I mean, I got what you said. So my concern still is, though, that because I feel like it's so industrial, I feel like we're using sort of residential impact assessments when we should be using industrial ones, and particularly with the waste treatment, given where it sits on a recharge area and on a shared aquifer, that at least the waste treatment should have a higher level of assessment as you would with a commercial project, not with a residential.
And are you saying the industrial part of it is based on the fact that the juice 75% of the juice comes from elsewhere, or
no, that they're making the cider and cleaning the equipment and having all the residue from the cider making and assumably the alcohol and dumping it on the land there, and does that. So it's all industrial stuff, and people are accessing their drinking water from there. So it seems to me they should be under the Environmental Management Act, not under Vancouver Coastal Health.
Daniel, did you want to respond to that?
No, I think I would just say it's like Vancouver Coastal Health accepted their filing as and completion for the septic field to service the cidery, knowing what that building was. And then in any of our referrals, they haven't flagged that as a concern.
So I guess I'm flagging it as a concern.
Yeah. But
Um,
like I know in other applications, they've been happy to flag concerns to me about like, they may have had a septic field, but were concerned about some aspect of it. And in this one, the response was that they're not concerned about the cidery. Like that's the septic system of the cidery.
but they're talking about it in reference to the residents there and the proposed hotel rather than to the industrial effluent. I mean, whether I think that from my point of view, we should be recommending a more rigorous assessment of the waste disposal on the site.
Okay, I see Sarah getting that down, so thank you. Richard Underdown, I see you next.
Yes, and just to follow up on your point, Betty, that was what was going through my head and reading of some of the submission from Heather Miller, just regarding consistency with the OCP policy on light industrial use as opposed to agriculture. Have we looked at it from that angle, Daniel?
Like in terms of should this be categorized as a light industrial use as opposed to agriculture?
Well, again, the fruit being crushed is not coming from the property. Some of it's from the property, but the majority, 5%, is coming from elsewhere. And would that not then classify this as light industrial use?
I mean, I think, my answer to be the same as to Betty. It's like, in my view, it's not. It's the same as a farm use that's permitted in the ALR. And if it was entirely fruit from that lot, that would be permitted, like without further approvals needed in our zoning. So it's like, is the trigger of some of the fruit coming from off, not on the lot, is that enough of a trigger to say this is light industrial versus agriculture?
Yeah, and I guess our
you know,
higher bars that one has to consider with effluent, with environmental concerns, with the aquifer. I think Rob said it did surprise me that the lees was really not that much relative to, like you said, 14,500 liters is the capacity of the tanks. So yeah, I'm not sure whether or not that small amount of effluent needs to be looked at in another way, but I guess it would alleviate some concern that I've read from the letters that have been written on this, if it was looked at as a light industrial operation. But okay, I don't have any further questions. Just,
Did you want that written down as a recommendation for council's consideration?
I don't think it could hurt, Brenda. And Daniel, you could say the same thing to council, that really it's what you've just said to us, and leave it up to them to decide.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a question. Daniel, forgive me, I think you may have answered this before, but the property that the cidery is located on, I believe you indicated that it is either part of the property is part of the Grafton Lake watershed. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I think you had asked that earlier. So I think the portion on and forgive me, I guess it's backwards, the eastern portion of the property where Murray Creek runs through, essentially the apple orchard flows in, is part of the Grafton watershed, and the western part of the property then actually falls off and is not part of the Grafton watershed.
And any idea what the progress is on the Grafton Lake watershed management study and proposed plan?
Yes, and forgive me while I just look it up. I know that I have a report on the agenda on Monday that gives an update on it. But it's not directly my project, so I'm just gonna make sure I get the wording right. Sorry. All right, we've received a draft memo. We're doing community engagement actually now. We'll have yeah. The project is in project is in phase 1 of 4 to be completed end of 2026.
Okay. And my question flows into, we had raised this concern with respect to the development proposal across the street about the timing of that coming prior to the study and resulting management plan being drafted, and whether it was appropriate to allow a change in use on a property that falls within that watershed prior to the completion of that management plan. And that I think is a concern with respect to this rezoning as well. So for me, I think it would be appropriate for council to consider the timing of this and whether it would be better to defer it until after we have the resulting management plan, because we can't change it then. And if the management plan contains some type of blanket language against restricting the use of land within the Grafton Lake watershed, well, that's something I think we would want to know ahead of considering this proposal. That's my thought as far as the recommendation is concerned. And particularly if they are going to have something for us at the end of this year. That's not too far away. We're in July already, near the end. Yeah. Anyone else? Richard Domeyer, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this is all about importing apples. If there was no importing apples, everything here would be an allowed use. They could get a business license. There would be no process. I see the
Sorry,
risk
Rich.
to the applicant of going through this process of having. I see the risk to the applicant of going through this process of maybe having to have a 50% set aside for nature requirement, which might limit their ability to plant more apples to make, how can I put it, the cidery or the rezoning not required. I'm not making sense here, but essentially right now, if a lot more of the site was planted with apple trees, this rezoning process would not, they might not have to go through this rezoning process. Then it might just be a permitted use. They'd need to get a business license, all would be good. So I see the risk if there's a 50% for nature requirement, that they would be forced into importing apples rather than having the choice to expand the orchard. Yeah, on the other hand, I mean, there's this investment that's been put into the business, and having the ability to import apples, that's obviously where that's obviously what's what the goal is. You know, I mean, maybe my recommendation would be that if we do a cover, if we rezone it as a cidery and we do a covenant, the covenant would say at least 25% of the apples needs to come from this site, so that not 100% of the apples can be imported. Then it's closer to being, you know, a permitted use. But
That's in there, I think, is it not, Daniel?
That's in the proposed cidery definition,
Yeah.
25% to come from on site.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I mean, then I have no recommendations. I don't know. It's yeah, sorry, just babble.
Well, I have a comment arising, and that is, Daniel, you had suggested that one thing we might want to, in fact, discuss was whether the conservation development policy should apply where there is no increase in densification. I believe you had
Yeah, I
mentioned
guess it
that.
was like I discussed the policy with the Parks Environment Committee, but I realized I hadn't specifically sort of flagged what I had, like I had been bringing this policy up as relevant for this rezoning, but I hadn't specifically flagged that. Yeah, the policy says it's for all rezoning applications which increase density outside of Snug Cove. And it's like, right, you know, probably be proper then for the committee when thinking about it, to think, yes, this applies to this rezoning. We do think it is an increase in density, and then that would flow into like whether it's relevant to the rezoning or not.
Well, I think, like for me, looking at it, while there is no increase in density in terms of like the number of homes, the number of residences, the impact of additional visitors using the site, you know, is quite akin to an increase in densification in terms of, you know, visitor trips, and the impact on the neighborhood of those visitor trips. And, you know, I think that that's worth considering with respect to whether the conservation development policy should in fact apply here. And if it does apply here, you know, that might be one way to try and get preservation of the trees, although I suppose it still doesn't prevent the heritage character of those trees from changing over time. And I did appreciate Rob's comments about, you know, things arising such as fire or disease, and not wanting to commit the property owners to something that they can't follow through with because of one of those issues arising. So, you know, I think it's a bit complicated in terms of how the existing orchard could be preserved, but I take Margaret Underhill's comments into consideration as well, that was a strong part of the rationale for why this cidery was, you know, a good idea, is because it would be complementary to the orchard and give an incentive to preserve the diversity of trees found there as part of the branding for the product. So I guess I'm babbling a little bit too, but I do think that that council should give consideration, and Sarah, I'm speaking to you now, that council should give consideration to whether there is a method, either through a covenant on that particular area of the property, or through the application of the conservation development policy, to offering some preservation for the diverse orchard that is there now. Richard Underdown?
Yeah, Brenda, it is a very tricky problem because as Rob has pointed out, it's not just preservation of the existing orchard, but it's the active management of it. It's the replanting of tree stock. It's, you know, it would be so easy to just neglect it, simply water it, and it won't be there in 20, 30 years. The intention is to preserve it, as Rob has indicated. They'd like to see it, you know, 50, 100 years from now. But it's the active management of that orchard that's the really tricky part. And I don't know how that can be enforced as a requirement of operating the cidery. And conversely, if the orchard dies, does the cidery have to shut down? That's a stretch, but you know, really, that's the
Mhm.
managing it.
Well, with the percentage being at 25%, you know, it seems to me that they would need to plant new trees perhaps, but they wouldn't be necessarily compelled to plant heritage varieties. But Daniel, over to you.
Sure. I was just going to say that, yes, so our conservation development policy talks about protecting farmland as a, you know, acceptable use. And so I think like the most straightforward covenant would be a covenant over the orchard areas to say these can only be used for agriculture or these can only be used for orchard. And then it's easy for us to enforce because it's like you're not using it for residential, you're not getting a building permit to build whatever, a new house there. That's easy to enforce, but it doesn't do that step of like, say, you have to manage the trees versus we've been trying to think about what would that covenant look like, you know, and does it involve like a annual agrologist report or something to say they're in good standing? And then what happens if the new owners say we don't have time and ability to manage these old trees? And yeah, you could imagine it going badly very soon, or somebody saying, okay, this whole thing isn't just worth it. Like I'm going to abandon the cidery business and I'll abandon the orchard and,
Right.
you know, make the whole thing go away.
Well, it's not just a matter of having it planted and agricultural use, it's the preservation
Yeah.
unique variety of
Mhm.
apples that really make it so special. Yeah, how do you enforce that?
It kind of seems like the best that could be done might be, Daniel, what you just suggested in terms of having the conservation development policy be applied to that area, which doesn't necessarily mean that heritage trees will be there, just that it has to be used for that agricultural use. Richard Domeyer, sorry.
Thanks, Brenda. Sorry, on a totally unrelated subject, I do have one recommendation that if we do go, or maybe regardless, one way or the other, whether it gets rezoned or not, that the site be flagged for the contaminated sites for a review by the under the contaminated sites regulation as the regulation applies. So if the property is sold, if there's a development permit, if there's anything else that you know, responsibility that the site be assessed, and that if there is contamination, then responsibility for the cleanup rests with Rob. Yeah,
Or whoever owns it at that point.
or which is Rob. Yeah.
Oh, I see. When it goes through, when the sale goes through of the property. Right, okay.
Actually, the review would happen before the sale goes through. You know, it's unusual because it's not a commercial or industrial property, so it's not usually flagged for review under the Contaminated Sites Act. But you know, I think anyway, any site can be if there's, you know, if there's been activity that pollutes the site, then it gets reviewed anyway.
So that council give consideration to requiring that a contaminated site study be completed before the property is sold? Is that the recommendation?
No, just that the site be flagged for review under the Contaminated Sites regulation as the regulation applies. So the regulation would apply if there's a development permit, if the site is being, I don't know how the regulation applies, but exactly, development permit for sure. You know, if it's sold for sure.
So the contaminated sites, like our first step is that essentially an owner has to complete the initial step, which is certifying to their best of their knowledge if certain uses have taken place on the property. I don't see, I'm just looking through them and I'm like, I don't see any that relate to alcohol production or, you know, cider, even like not generically.
Okay, no, that's great. Then,
Yeah.
you know, it's not an issue, and that's allays
Yeah.
Betty's concerns, and maybe you know, the neighbors' concerns and others' concerns about you know, contamination from the process.
I've just posted in the chat for people who are curious, the Schedule 2, which is specified industrial or commercial uses, that when somebody fills out the contaminated site regulation, they tick like if they're aware of any of these uses taking place on their property.
Okay. So, Richard, are you satisfied with that explanation, or would you like to have this as a recommendation?
I think it doesn't need to be a recommendation because you know, we've already looked at it and it doesn't apply. So you know, in 20 seconds, Daniel's managed to do that. Well done.
Okay, so that recommendation is withdrawn. Kirsty.
Hi, just I may be slow. I am slow, but Daniel, the cidery can just to confirm with this zoning, the cidery can only operate if 25% of the juice comes from trees on site. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so it's rezoned, so it is still agricultural in use. If they want to downzone it, and just shut down the cidery, a purchaser, that's their option. So I think it's great having another business on the island. I don't have any problem with that, but I think it needs to fit within the agricultural use. And so that's what I was concerned about, that they could run a cidery and not have the orchard. So if it's going to be a cidery, they're going to have to maintain the orchard. Now they may graft those trees, they may change trees, because it wasn't a cidery orchard. It's just an interesting orchard and a challenge, and it's not easy to maintain, I know. But anyway, I think that for me, that resolves the issues, that if it's going to be a cidery, they're going to have the trees. So that solves the problem.
Okay, thank you. Now I wonder does anyone else have anything to add? Because I think we're getting to the point where we maybe want Sarah to share her screen. And is everyone okay if we move to that next?
Yeah.
One quick
Richard Underdown, go ahead.
point, Brendan, that is on the lack of a public hearing in the process. Daniel, is there any provision for having a public hearing that would still allow for the timeline to be met of rezoning prior to the expiration of the TUP?
I mean, I guess the short answer is yes. You know, depending on, I guess, what your assumption is for council meetings through October when there's a municipal election. But in theory, there would be enough meetings to still have a public hearing. When we discussed it with council at that May 25th meeting, and they selected an alternative, which was to have no public hearing, there was discussion that to issue the notice for first reading as if there was no public hearing. We sort of had a discussion that we hadn't encountered before, which is like, could council give that notice for first reading and still hold a public hearing? And the answer was yes, council could still decide at first reading to say, we're still going to send this to a public hearing. They've just given the notice for first reading such that they don't have to do a public hearing, if that makes sense. So, I mean, essentially my timeline would be, if assuming this meeting goes and it comes to council the next meeting and council wants to give it first reading and refer to the Islands Trust, that then we'd be looking to come back in September with a response from the Islands Trust to proceed. There are enough council dates in, between then and the end of December to hold a public hearing as well.
Well, if there is no downside then to having a public hearing, I don't see why one would be eliminated. I'm not sure everyone who has wanted to weigh in on this has. There's no public hearing of the initial temporary use permit or the renewal of it. And isn't this really the stage at which public should be invited to weigh in with any concerns? I'm reading there's 50,000 people that have visited this. I'm a little surprised that the neighbors have not recognized any increase in traffic or congestion or parking or garbage issues, things like that. Maybe
we received, when it was introduced, we received letters from the neighbors. Like when the original application, there were letters from the neighbors. I think there's like one letter from all the neighbors opposed to the guest house use, and in the amended one, then we've had continued letters. In the vein of Margaret Underhill, who spoke today, in terms of their reluctant acceptance, I think, of the continued operation of the cidery.
Yeah, I guess to the extent that Margaret speaks for everyone who has an interest in this, then it may not be a need, but I think council should still consider having a public hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Sarah, I wonder if you could share screen now so we can have an opportunity to go through the recommendations.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a bit from Richard to it.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, let me know if it's a little bit noisy here. There's someone vacuuming. I'm still at the office.
Okay.
Can't hear it.
Okay. Yeah, good. Let's see. There we go. Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
It's fairly
Okay.
small on my screen.
Oh,
but
yeah, sorry. Hang on, let me make it a lot bigger for you.
Thank you.
Let's do that. Is that better?
Yes, it is. Thank you. These
Great.
old eyes. Okay. So the first one being that an environmental waste management assessment be required to evaluate production wastewater, cleaning effluent, and organic byproducts from cidery operations, ensuring waste impacts are fully assessed beyond the septic review. Okay. I think this was Betty's recommendation. Betty, does that adequately capture your intention?
Is she still in, Daniel? I've got my screen share view up.
Oh.
Yeah, she may not.
She's there. She's just muted.
Okay. I know she's on, I think she might be still on her phone, so she might not be able to.
She gave a thumbs up for what that's
Okay.
worth.
All right, thank you. I could not see that. That consideration of the rezoning be deferred pending completion of the Grafton Lake Watershed Management Plan to ensure watershed impacts are fully assessed. That was mine. I think that adequately captures, perfectly captures what I had said. Council should give consideration to whether there is a method, either through a covenant or the application of the conservation development policy, to offer the preservation
I
to
missed a little
preserve.
bit there. I know I
Yeah.
missed a little bit there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. To preserve the diversity of the existing orchard. I mean, it may not be possible, but at least it's a worthy, I think, objective. And then finally, that council should still consider having a public hearing for this application or of this application. Okay. Does anybody have anything that they want to add here or wordsmithing?
Could we add the word heritage to orchard? So to preserve the diversity of the existing heritage orchard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Keeping in mind I can't see you, so you'll just have to speak up. Okay. Well, hearing nothing, I think we can stop the share screen. Can we have a motion to vote on the approval of the recommendations to council? Not seeing anyone. Richard Underdown, thank you. Betty seconding. All right. Barring any discussion, I think we've discussed all of these. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. All those opposed? Abstaining? Richard Domeyer, I haven't heard from you. Are you abstaining? Sorry, it's not clear to me how you're
Abstaining, yeah, sorry.
abstaining.
Challenged. Technically challenged.
Okay,
Sorry, point of order.
thank you.
I don't believe abstentions are possible within the municipality's procedure framework. Just looking to the committee clerk here to see, is that correct?
Thank you.
Well, in that case, I'd vote against, but hopefully it still goes through.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. The next item on the agenda are the Buchanan Road properties. I feel conflicted on this one because I am reasonably good friends with one of the proponents here. And so I am going to remove myself from the discussion. So Kirsty, if you could take over as chair for the remainder of the meeting, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brenda.
Yeah, good night.
You get to get out early.
I do.
Good night.
Okay, I guess, Daniel, is this you as well?
This is me as well. Drew is unfortunately away, so you have to get me twice. All right, so I'm sharing screen. This is a rezoning application for two properties, 670 and 648 Buchanan Road. All right, so they are located roughly in the middle of the island at the intersection of Adams and Buchanan Road. Where are my notes here? Together, the two properties are just over 4 hectares in size. one of them being slightly above and one of them being slightly below 2 hectares. In our official community plan, in our current official community plan, these properties are designated RS, which is rural residential, which outlines an average lot size of 1 hectare each. And so under the OCP land use designation, that would support 4 lots total being where there are currently 2. But in our land use bylaw, they're zoned rural residential 3, which has a 2 hectare minimum lot size, so subdivision is not possible. So these 2 properties together have applied for the ability to be able to subdivide to create 2 additional lots, so a total of 4 lots where there's currently 2. And as part of their application, the applicants have provided a site plan showing proposed park dedication as part of their application. So that's the area shown in green. And the cross hatching shown on the map are existing covenanted areas from the previous subdivision. And then you'll see on this site plan at the south end are proposed new lots. And okay. No, where am I going? Okay, this was a map from an environmental assessment that was completed as part of the application. So it shows most of the property is mature mixed forest. It shows the water course that runs through the property east-west as well as north-south, an artificial wetland, and then it shows what's called an inundated area to the south. So we this came to council, I feel like in March. And so in April, we actually conducted a site visit. So I know some members of the APC were able to conduct that site visit. So we met at the bottom of the site and we walked through a neighboring municipal park and then across the property together with the members of the Parks Environment Climate Action Committee. And so in terms of their review of the application, what the Parks Environment Climate Action Committee recommended was they recommended meeting the 50% conservation policy. And so they recommended, meeting the 50% conservation policy. They recommended a public trail connection between Mike Lorg and Buchanan Park. They recommended the covenant protect riparian zones and wetlands, and then expand the proposed park designation to include areas north of Bowen Brook and potentially the north end of the new lot to the west. So if I come back, that was to include the covenanted areas here, as well as, sorry, I'm jumping around, as well as this pink inundated area to the south that was identified in the environmental report. And this is just going back. This is the original council motion, March 9th, when it was referred to this committee and to the Parks Committee. So that's where we are in the process. The next step is after this referral is complete, we report back to council looking for direction to draft first reading bylaws. So I'm going to stop sharing there and open it for any questions.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Richard D? You have to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, I've never heard of a development in a riparian setback. I think the Act sort of expressly forbids it. So I just don't think this proposal is feasible. That's my comment.
Daniel, can you comment on that?
Sure. I mean, I guess what part of it are you thinking of?
Well, in the presentation, it said that the 2 sites are entirely within the riparian setbacks.
Sorry,
So,
if I can pull up the site plan here.
or did I misread that?
Yeah. So the riparian goes through north or east-west through here, Bowen Brook. And so what's proposed is that to the south would be park dedication. The north is a covenanted area. That the Parks Environment recommendations to expand the park dedication to expand to cover more of that riparian area.
Okay, so the creek that's running top to bottom, doesn't have a riparian setback requirement.
It probably has a setback requirement as well. I mean, what the Act requires is that it outlines a 30-meter riparian area. And no development can take place within that 30 meters until you've completed a riparian assessment, and then that assessment identifies what's called a SPEA, which is the Streamside Protection Enhancement Area, and no development can take place within the SPEA, which is typically, it depends on the nature of the stream, but it's somewhere between 5 and 15 meters typically. So what we'll often seek to do, especially for larger creeks and water courses, is try to use this rezoning mechanism to have complete control of the riparian area, like the 30-meter riparian area.
So the
And that's
local
what's
government must not approve or allow a residential, commercial, industrial development to proceed in an area wholly or partially within all or
Yes, exactly. So the riparian assessment area is the 30 meters until you've done a detailed assessment, at which point it is the SPEA that's identified by the environmental professional.
Does that make sense to you, Richard?
no, because it doesn't make sense to me, because I've never ever seen a development in the 30-meter setback. I've seen people move the creek so that they're not in the 30-meter setback, but I've never seen anyone build in the 30-meter, maybe just slightly, but in this case just doesn't seem, I don't know. That's but I can't say I'm as expert as Daniel, so I don't know.
Daniel, that shows the proposed house sites. I guess there's 2 houses there now, is there?
Yes, one of them has a detached secondary suite as well, so I guess there's 3 dwellings
Currently.
currently.
And so the 2 new lots are at the bottom, is that?
That's correct.
Okay, and so they aren't going to be within 30 meters of the stream, or if they are, then it'll require
Under our
approval.
bylaws, if they are, they would require development approval. And if they are if that is a tributary, which I believe it is, then it would require provincial approval.
So does that resolve your issue, Richard, that it's gonna, if they're within 30 meters, they're gonna have to get provincial approval?
All I would say is I would never buy those I would never buy one of those lots, because I would just think it's way too risky, that I would not get permission to construct. The other thing that when we were walking around there was a lot of there had been a flood in the area. There was a lot of wetlands, and we were sort of discussing recommending a flood hazard assessment, because there had been a flood there at the building permit stage. So, I don't know, it doesn't apply now, but maybe we can flag, that it should be done. My thoughts. Anyway, I don't know.
Daniel, do you have any? I wasn't at the walk around, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, Richard, where was that on the site?
I think it was
the floods. I think the flood evidence was on the west side. There was a bridge. The bridge had been flooded.
Right. Yes. So like that was when we were walking through the municipal park land.
Mhm.
And so, yes, we did discuss like Bowen Brook, drains quite a large area. It does get quite large. The building sites are up quite steeply from those. But it's definitely something we could flag in terms of even just noting, like it's common that we require a hazard assessment as part of a subdivision. Typically on Bowen, it's for like landslide, rockfall. Normally you're like under a cliff that we need assessed to make sure, whatever, the outlet. But flooding as well as something that gets flagged at that stage. And so that's a great recommendation, I think, for
Okay, so Sarah, do you have that?
Yes, there would. Let me grab it.
Because I think, yeah, if a flood assessment would be a useful thing to require.
Okay.
And is that, yeah, before subdivision as opposed to it would have happened on building, getting a building approved, but the subdivision.
Yeah, I mean, we would do it at building permit stage kind of only if we weren't able to do it at subdivision. It's more restricted. I mean, the other thing we would do is we would do it as a requirement of rezoning that says you can't subdivide unless you've
So
done the correct.
So would I say that a flood hazard assessment should be carried out as a requirement for
Prior to
rezoning?
rezoning? Or
like yeah, it should be required as a condition of rezoning.
okay.
Okay. Should be.
Richard, does that resolve your?
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean, just going back to the first point of developing in the riparian, I mean, here on Bowen, it's not only the house, it's a septic field, it's a well, all in the riparian. So I would be very cautious.
Yeah,
But
okay, well,
I don't
that's,
think there's a recommendation to make there. It's just a comment.
well, I think Sarah put it in as a recommendation, so I think that's good. Richard, did you?
I was also on the walk around. I don't recall that tributary to Bowen Creek, Bowen Brook, Daniel. Does it flow only certain times of the year, or is it because when we site and walked east along the road or on the edge of the road to the south of the proposed 2 new lots, I don't recall traversing anything that was like a creek as drawn on the map here. So, to your point, Richard, if that's the riparian zone that you're concerned about, the regulations won't allow for development, within that riparian zone. I just don't recall seeing it. So I don't know how significant it is. But in any case, it's, up to the buyer as to whether or not they want to deal with the setbacks that would be required. I think the proposal is a good one. I'm in favor of it. The size of the lot allows for 2 additional lots, and I really don't have any other concerns or comments.
Great, thanks, Richard. I have one question. I'm sorry, because I wasn't on the walk around. Where is the water coming from for these new houses? Is it wells?
It would be wells. The existing lots are serviced by wells, and it would be additional wells.
Okay,
And
so
we
there's
would
2 wells, one on each site already.
Correct. And we would obviously, like, our subdivision bylaw requires, like, when you want to create new properties that are serviced by wells, you need the correct report from the engineer that says there's enough water to serve this dwelling, and that drawing on this well doesn't deplete existing users. So they essentially have to do a stress test of the well to certify that it is a viable source of water.
Okay.
I'll just note, the Parks Environment Committee's recommendation was to seek 50% conservation policy, and then in that they were recommending protection of riparian zones and wetlands. So they weren't specifying specific areas, but just saying as a general rule, they think it should meet the 50%, and they think the protected areas should be the riparian areas and wetlands. So that may be something the APC wants to copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with what they did.
Do those riparian zones comprise 50%?
I think no. I think it would be more than that, but kind of their point was like, if you're highlighting 50%, it's like it should include within that 50% should be the riparian areas and the wetlands.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to, if they've already recommended it, should we just copy it, Sarah?
Yeah, probably. Daniel, do you have it handy that you could? Do you still have it?
Yeah.
I knew you had it there.
Yeah.
I mean, I can find it, but I want you to be able to vote on it right here.
Seems pretty obvious, but I guess, yes, we should include it.
Or shall we vote on it and let Sarah find it from Daniel?
Sorry, let me just.
I'm worried that my power might go out.
Oh no.
There's a huge windstorm that suddenly come up, and my internet and my power are at risk.
Okay.
Huh.
Recommend.
It hasn't hit here yet over in Bowen Bay, Kirsty, but thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Everything's just howling on my
Yeah.
deck, and the
We
internet
could
has
see
gone
your
off
plants.
every night.
Where are you?
Cowan's Point, down
Oh.
below the golf course.
Mhm. The concept. Hang on. That.
We have a problem with internet here.
Oh, really?
The conservation policy should be met. Okay. Do you want me to share and I'll show you what I have?
Yes, please.
It's pretty straightforward. Okay.
Okay, is that are we going to say we're supportive of the rezoning application, providing?
We can say, yeah, is.
Well, yeah. Richard and Betty, you didn't have any comments, but does does that cover your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that,
Yeah.
Kirsty.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Okay, great. And Betty, did you have any comments, or you?
I will tell you I'm on under 10% phone, so I just gonna vote yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we should officially, all those in favor? Or I guess we move in second. Okay, we'll take Richard as a mover and a seconder, and all in favor?
Yes.
Betty, before you disappear?
Perfect.
Before I disappear? Okay. Is that it for our agenda, isn't it,
I think
That's
so.
it.
Sarah?
Yeah.
So we can all say good night. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you so much, everyone.